Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's Tudor Talk. And of course, we are back for a new autumn season, having taken a little break over the summer. And it's great to see some of you already here, and I'm going to be checking in with you in a moment. So if you are tuning in and you're watching, then make sure you let me know where you are in the world, what you've been up to. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, what you've been doing with your summer. Have you been out and about? Have you seen anything? Particularly if you're here in the UK, I appreciate that all over the world people are still a little bit confined by COVID. So it's a little bit difficult. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you must be looking forward to, in the Southern Hemisphere, you must be looking forward to summer coming. So anyway, yeah, do say hi. So I'm just going to do a few bits of housekeeping before I check in with a few of you guys. I can see you dropping a few notes there. Just to say, as ever, this live chat is going to be going on for about an hour. So I will kick off by introducing our guest and asking a few questions, but then I'm going to be coming to you. So I hope you've come along with loads of questions about Hever Castle and the Boleyns, because of course we have the perfect person to be answering those questions today. Okay, now the other thing I just wanted to let you know, if you are joining in new, you've not been here before, you might be wondering what this is. This is my QR code for Instagram, and I'm spending more time on Instagram these days than any other social media platform. In fact, I'm in the middle of a 30-day Instagram reel challenge, so that's one reel a day, and I think I'm on day 8. So you might want to, if you're not following me on Instagram, come along, join in, see what I'm up to, and see if I manage to get to the end of my 30 days. And if you've got any suggestions about what you might like me to make a reel about, then of course, feel free to let me know. You can always message me at sarah@thetudortravelguide.com. Okay, let's see who's in the house tonight. So we've got Karen. Hi, Karen. You're from Northern California. That's great. Well, stay tuned, because Owen, I love talking to Owen. He knows so much. We're going to get so many facts tonight. It's going to be great. And Cynthia, lovely to see you again, my friend from Florida. Oh, that sounds nice. Lovely, lovely. Sue from Medway, Kent. Hi, Sue. And Gail. Hello, Gail. One of my Live Like a Tudor friends. So I was just running my first Live Like a Tudor weekend event with my colleague from tudorexperience.com. That's Brigitte Webster. And we had the most amazing time doing all sorts of Tudor things over the weekend. And it was lovely to see Gail there. So, and then we've got Emma from Germany, and Jamie is from Michigan. Hey, Jamie. Hi, lovely to see you. Susan, and lovely to see you, Janet. Oh my goodness, there's quite a lot of people coming in here. This is wonderful. How great to see you all. And Janice, hello, Janice from East Sussex. Lovely to see you. And we've got, it's Laura. Hello, Laura from Slovakia. We've got all sorts of people: Canada, Slovakia, Spain, Dallas, Argentina, Florida. Wow. Woo, it's amazing, isn't it? It blows your mind to think folk from all over the place joining us tonight. Okay, well, let's not hesitate anymore. Let's get on with the business of the evening. Now, I am so delighted for this first of the new season to be welcoming somebody who I've got to know quite well over the last year or so. And I hope he would also consider me a new friend. I always love going down to Hever Castle and seeing Owen Emmerson. Of course, Owen is the castle historian, the castle historian, goodness me, and assistant co-curator at Hever Castle. And of course, many of you will have seen him recently on the BBC Two documentary, The Boleyns, a Scandalous Family. And I'd love to know what you thought about it. I thought it was epic. I absolutely loved it. And I hope today that we'll get into a little bit of chat around that. And we're also going to be talking to Owen, really anything Boleyns, anything Hever, and particularly about his new book. And before I bring Owen in, I just want to say, if you haven't read the new book by Owen and Claire, The Boleyns of Hever, then I highly commend it. It's a fabulous little book, and I've put links in the description below, so for Amazon UK and Amazon US, so you can pick yourself up a copy. But now, drum roll, let me welcome in Owen. Hello.
Hello, my lovely friend. How are you doing? That was a very nice introduction.
Oh, yeah, lovely to see you. And I know, and I'll tell everybody, you've hot-footed it in from work today, haven't you? So you just finished about an hour ago and you rushed home to be part here today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I just can't get enough of Hever. I've come straight from the castle to talk about it.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, I think you must be the world's expert now on Hever, right? And the Boleyns, I think. I think you could
Well,
probably
there's
call yourself that now.
we're really lucky. We've got an amazing team at Hever, and I like to say I'm a sort of a part of a collective of experts there.
Quite right, quite right, quite right. Now, of course, Hever is the childhood home of Anne Boleyn. It's a mecca for all those people who love Anne Boleyn, and you know, we're all fairly envious of the fact that you get to work there every day. So I thought, really, to start, for those people who maybe haven't heard you chat or haven't had a chance to interact with you, maybe you could tell us how you got this amazing job. You know, how did you come to be doing this? And also, Owen, have you always loved the Boleyns and Anne, or was your interest cultivated by coming to work at Hever?
That's a really good question. To introduce myself, I'm a social and cultural historian, and I've always loved Anne Boleyn. Certainly, I think my first memories of my childhood were of Anne. I watched the 1969 film Anne of the Thousand Days with my mother when I was 4 years old. It's one of my earliest memories, and it was around my birthday time. We visited Hever for my birthday because I fell in love with it on screen. And I've been in love ever since, if I'm honest.
Mm.
So yes, I've always been interested in Anne Boleyn, um, and I've come to know many variations of Anne. You know, finding her on screen with Geneviève Bujold, and then finding different versions of her. I think the second version of Anne I found was Dorothy Tootin in the Six Wives of Henry VIII from 1970. And yeah, I mean, I've spent my life sort of searching through different um, interpretations of her, not least the many interpretations of her that we found at Hever Castle. And of course, I'm obsessed with the Anne of history as well, and peeling back those layers and getting at her.
Yeah.
So yes, it's been a lifelong fascination.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I imagine then when you took your job at Hever, there was a reason behind that. There was a real mutual love affair going on. You must have been absolutely bursting with happiness when you got your first position there.
Yeah, very much so. I went to university later on in life, and with the ambition of working at a place like Hever. And when I got to my doctoral studies, I um, actually run out of funding and had to fund the last sort of 6 months of study. So I thought, why not get a job at Hever? And I worked in the operations department. So I was selling tickets, car parking, things like that in my spare time while I was finishing off my doctoral thesis. And I just stayed. Yeah, I absolutely fell in love all over again with Hever. It's hard not to be in love with the place, to be honest. And yeah,
Well,
I've been there ever since.
that's such an inspirational story, actually. I love it when people follow their heart and their passion. Now, let's get into the business of Hever because we had a little bit of conversation about this recently, but I find this particularly intriguing. I was saying to you in an earlier conversation that I felt that quite recently there's been a real shift in the amount of knowledge and understanding we have about the castle and how it was used, and also about the Boleyns. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about about those two things, really. That's quite a big subject, Owen. I think I'm sort of asking you to cover quite a lot of ground. But what do you think? Do you think that's right? Do you think that we're going through a period of renaissance with regards to Hever and the Boleyns? And if so, what bits do you think we're revealing that maybe we haven't known about or thought about before?
Very much so. I think there's been a lot of changes at Hever itself, and I would attribute those changes to people like Alison Palmer, who is our incredible curator, and she is an amazing person to work with, and she has really dedicated her time to thinking about how you use a property that has been built up, and a collection that is fairly eclectic, that's been built up over many years, how you represent that collection when the story changes, when what we know about the Boleyns' time at Hever changes, and also when the narrative sort of solidifies, and also when people are prepared to welcome that narrative into the overall narrative that you present to visitors. So I think Alison's been a fundamental part in that shift, actually, at Hever. It's very difficult because these rooms have existed really since 1903 in the way that they are being presented. And it's a lot to ask to, particularly of the owners and those managing it, to change certain aspects, because in and of themselves have become part of history. If we have a Henry VIII bedchamber, it's very difficult to alter people's perceptions about that space as and when we find out more about them. So there's a really big question to be had: which history matters?
Good question.
Do we prioritise the history of the Boleyns at Hever, because they only stayed there for 77 years? There were many other owners, many other characters, and they had their own impact on Hever. So it's always a negotiation about which bit of history matters. And of course, I would say the vast majority of people come to Hever to find out about the Boleyns. And there has been a real renaissance, I think, in the study of the Boleyns. And actually, I think there are a lot of women that are behind that renaissance, not least yourself and Natalie Gruninger in your amazing efforts. But there are people who I would consider heroes who have done incredible work. Claire Ridgway, the amazing historian who I'm proud to have co-written with, Susanna Lipscomb, Laura Mackay, Estelle Perronc. There are so many women who have done incredible research into these people's lives. And, I find it quite astonishing that we are popping some of those bubbles, those myths, and that it's almost becoming mainstream again. This narrative that has been built up over the past sort of 10 years, I would say. So yeah, I have to give a big shout out to a huge amount of women who've done amazing work, and it's lovely to see it permeating into the popular narrative. So seeing it reflected in the docudrama recently that you spoke about, the Boleyns, a Scandalous Family. Seeing those ideas on a mainstream documentary was amazing.
Yeah. You talked about myths and myths to be busted, and I'd love to come back to maybe some myths that we need to bust about Hever and the Boleyns, but we have a couple of questions already, so I want to make sure that we So we're rewinding the conversation slightly. As Janet's asked, which version of Anne Boleyn, I'm presuming the pop culture version of Anne Boleyn, do you think is the best representation of her?
So this is a really good question. It's one I think about a lot because I love exploring Anne in popular culture. The one I like most is probably Geneviève Bujold in Anne of the Thousand Days. It was my first incarnation of Anne, and I think there's a bit of muscle memory going on. I always think of her because she was my first incarnation. The one that best, I actually would say the most recent. I utterly adore the version that we've just seen on the Boleyns, A Scandalous Family, and yeah, I think I think she did incredibly well. So
what do you think it was that she embodied that makes you feel that she was a close representation?
So I loved the fact that there was complexity in her character. This wasn't someone who was an outright villain. This wasn't someone who was a saint. This is someone who I could relate to in a way that I probably haven't at any other incarnation. She was complicated. You could see her sort of ambition shift, and you can see her sort of working out. This wasn't someone who was had a grand scheme, but someone who was reacting to everything that was happening. So yes, I would have to actually say my now favourite is Raphael Cohen.
Well, I have to say, for her to dislodge your first, that is quite something. But I did enjoy her portrayal a lot. I thought it was it really touched me. But somebody else was, what was I? Oh yes, the myths. I think one of the myths you touched on there that I think people sometimes get a little bit entangled in is they see Anne as very black or white, and of course she wasn't. She was so complex. She was so multi-dimensional. So I think any portrayal for me that gets close to that is getting closer to Anne, and that probably says why there are some portrayals that I don't much care for, because they're very very two-dimensional for me.
She was a really messy individual. And I'm not overly sure that I would like her all the time. I'm not sure she would like me if I ever met her. This is a really complex individual, and she really divided opinion. And anyone that's able to convey a sense of, I don't know how to put it, but there are certain people, whether you love them or loathe them, that people are perpetually fascinated by. And that was Anne Boleyn. It didn't matter if you liked her or loathed her, people still were obsessed by her.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to portray.
No, it's not.
An easy thing,
No. It's funny because I often have the thought of, would I like Anne? I mean, and would she like me? Would I could imagine her being quite picky about the company, but once you were in, you were really in.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on, because Gail has asked a slightly different question, but related to the TV programme. And Gail has said, one revelation of the TV programme to me was seeing Anne's brother as a serious, ambitious person. Usual films make him seem younger and weaker. Nice perspective. Does Owen have any comments on this?
Yeah, this is one area of the documentary that made my heart sing. I have longed to see a generous interpretation of George's life, and this is an area that has been studied beautifully by Claire Cherry, Claire Ridgway, and Dr. Lauren Mackay. George was a glittering individual. popular culture has been so bad for George Boleyn, far worse than for Anne Boleyn. He really has come across really badly, even in the most generous interpretation. So in Anne of the Thousand Days, he's a nothing person. He's a bit part. This was someone that was cut from Anne's cloth. They were equals. And I actually think George had every possibility of being as successful as his father in the diplomatic sphere. We know that he's an eloquent poet. We know he is a gifted courtier. This is someone with so much potential, and I almost think he sacrifices a lot of that potential, because he is happy to facilitate his sister's rise. At some point, he is literally the royal message bearer. He is writing letters from Greenwich or whatever palace Henry's at to Hever. He is the message bearer. And I think his story is incredibly tragic. What happened to Anne was horrific. It was just as horrific with what happened to George. They were so close. They were as thick as thieves. They had so much in common, and what they were charged with was so cruel. It would have really hurt both of them. It really would, and it of course it was intended to. It was intended to take advantage of their closeness. Everyone would have known how close George and Anne were. Yes, so I loved the interpretation of George on screen. I thought it was brilliant. It was so lovely to see him practicing his speech that he gave to Convocation, for example. And
I know you enjoyed when they read the dedication. I can't remember if it was Anne read the dedication that George had. That was it's not something that's often brought out, and it was just done so beautifully. I know you enjoyed it, and I thought that was one of the highlights for me, actually.
Totally. I mean, and it was just a really beautiful moment. I loved the fact that the producers really wanted to root this in primary sources, and that was a really beautiful way of it meshing the docu and the drama together. Seeing George read aloud that dedication to Anne. I mean, I've studied that document. It's beautiful. The sentiment behind it is just so. I often think to myself, I'd love to have that kind of relationship with someone that someone's prepared to do that for them. It's not something I think I've ever experienced myself. So yes, a dream come true to see moments like that.
I'm just going to read a comment. So Jamie Diane, thank you. Jamie Diane says, I love that there's so much renaissance of the Boleyns of the Six Wives. Always found it hard to connect with Anne, but now I feel like I'm getting a much clearer picture of her and her family. Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and I completely understand why people haven't warmed to her, because the images they've seen of her aren't particularly warm. They're quite cold and quite calculating, and I think it's time that we revise that and allow people to see a different version of not only Anne but her whole family. These are, I would argue, particularly wronged individuals. So it's lovely to be a part of that anyway.
Well, we might come back and talk some more about different members of the family or the TV series. But again, I want to just keep coming back to the questions. And we've got one actually now about one of the artifacts in the castle, and that's the tapestry of the wedding, or the potential tapestry of the wedding. I don't know where you are with that at the moment. But anyway, I think it was Cynthia, I think you're saying, I want to know more about the tapestry of the wedding. And Janet said, yes, me too. So I mean, it's a fabulous piece when you walk into that Book of Hours room. traditionally said to be the wedding tapestry of Louis XII and Mary Tudor, possibly featuring Anne Boleyn in there somewhere. But I know there's been some research going on around that tapestry. So what can you tell us, Owen?
It's one of my favourite artifacts in the castle, although I say that about most things because I love everything. But it really is. It's lovely. It's lovely that it's hanging in the Great Chamber. It's now called the Books of Hours Room, but essentially where it's hanging was the primary space that the Boleyns would have occupied when they were at Hever. So it's lovely that it's decorating a room as that room would have been decorated with arras and tapestry. So I love the fact that it's there. It was purchased by William Waldorf Astor, who was an owner of Hever from 1903. And it was purchased as the wedding tapestry of Mary Rose, that's Henry VIII's younger sister, to King Louis XII of France. And it's had that tradition for a long time. I believe it was actually purchased from Paris. And if you visit Hever today, it's still called the wedding tapestry of Mary Rose and Louis. And of course, we know that Mary Boleyn accompanies Mary to France. And it's believed that it's possible that Anne was in attendance. She certainly was transferring to the French court because of that marriage. We're not quite sure if she made it in time. It's a bit of a grey area. It depends on which journey she made. So yes, I love the fact that many, many generations of people have tried to find out which is Anne, which is Mary in there. There is the possibility that this isn't necessarily what it purports to be. So on the dress of the bride is an inscription which reads Esther. So it's possible that this is not Mary Rose, that this is the marriage of Esther to King Ahasuerus from the Bible. Or it's possible that it's a combination of both, that this is a fusion, as it were. This is Mary Rose in that role.
Tudor mashup.
Yeah, this is, there are examples of this happening as well. So whether or not it is the marriage, I think it's still pertinent to Anne's story. Of course, Anne was the second queen. King Ahasuerus had put aside his first wife, and Anne had an affinity with Esther. Indeed, she evokes the story of Esther right at the end of her queenship, or rather her John Skip, her almoner does. And this is largely seen as a warning shot across Thomas Cromwell's bows, because she, or Skip rather, evoked the story of Esther, who was almost thwarted by the king's right-hand man, Haman, but Queen Esther prevailed. And of course, this is seen as Anne challenging Cromwell and accompanying it with a threat of having Cromwell's head. And of course, Cromwell prevails in this version of the story. So whether or not it's the marriage it purports to be, or if it's Esther, this is a very pertinent piece to Anne Boleyn's story. So I'm more than delighted that it's a Hever.
Well, I was going to ask you about what your favourite object is. One that you've actually touched and seen. And is there a favourite object you'd love to see, but you haven't yet seen or touched?
So my favourite... Oh, this is so hard.
I know it is, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's going to have to be a Book of Hours, and it's going to have to be the 1527 Book of Hours. Now, this has often been seen as the inferior of the two Books of Hours that we have of Anne Boleyn's, until the extraordinary research of the wonderful historian and my assistant curator, Kate McCaffrey, who has done the most exquisite research on this book of ours that I have ever seen. It's extraordinary work. And it has given me a profound and enduring love for this artifact. So, yes, I would have to say that's probably my new favourite artifact at Hever that I have touched. My heart always stops when I'm able to touch it. It feels like an incredible privilege to be able to hold something that I know and not only held, but this book was most likely made for her. So it tells us something about her style as well. And of course, she's inscribed it and she signed it. There is, as our steward Ian Smith always says, there's her DNA all over it. Not just in terms of touch DNA, but in terms of style. This was such a personal and beloved object of hers. And to be able to hold it is, I can't describe it really. It's yes. Do you mean things I haven't held at Hever or
just anywhere? No, anywhere. Yeah.
It's got to be the Checkers ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw Tracy Borman,
you were envious. So was I.
That's a legend. Oh yeah, I was so jealous when I realised that she'd got to hold it, and I don't actually think she thought she was going to be able to hold it. And was invited to, and I've had those moments myself where you're not anticipating it, and wow, I mean, it is such a beautiful object. I'm convinced that this is a mother-daughter portrait, that this is Elizabeth and Anne. So yes, that's one object that not only would I love to very selfishly hold and experience, but actually would love to see it at Hever one day.
Yes, an exhibition.
It's a real it's a real ambition of mine to hold an exhibition, perhaps on a really salient anniversary, where we could get as much of Anne at Hever as possible and just have like a massive Anne fest.
That would be great. Yes. Yes.
I'd love to have the most happy medal as well. I'm just gonna tick off my.
I think you should. Yeah. Absolutely. Now we've got quite a few questions coming in, so we might have to slightly. I'm going to start with Gail's about the ring because we're just talking about it, but then I'm going to go back. There's a few other questions about Hever, so let's focus on what folk are asking about. So Gail's just saying, what do you think the ring means?
I think this sums up Elizabeth's attitude and approach to her mother. She very rarely spoke about her mother. I think there's only 2 recorded instances where we actually know that she talked about her publicly. I don't doubt that she talked about her mother with the many Boleyn relatives and supporters that she promoted at her own court. But of course, there's a difference between the public and the private. But what Elizabeth did do was speak about her mother in images. Her courtiers fill their long galleries with images of Anne posthumously created to recognise Elizabeth's legitimacy and the new light in which Anne is to be seen. I think this was probably gifted to Elizabeth. I don't think it's something that Elizabeth would have had commissioned. And I think it's a recognition of the importance of her mother. I mean, what happened to Anne was horrific, and I think it shaped the woman that Elizabeth was. Not necessarily because of her memories of her mother, but what her mother's death meant for the rest of Elizabeth's struggle to get to the throne. Her life was irrevocably shaped by what happened to Anne Boleyn, her mother. So I think this is a very intimate, private object about the love that she had for her mother.
Oh, if only we knew what if only we had some words from Elizabeth.
Yeah,
about what she felt about everything that happened. Wouldn't that be a fascinating conversation to have?
it would, but I think we kind of have that moment in Norwich Cathedral where she directs for the throne to be her throne to be faced
Yes,
facing the Boleyn Chapel. I think that says
there's so
everything.
much. Yeah.
It does. It does.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Right, okay, we are going to jump around a bit now.
Fab.
So Sue was asking, Sue Amos. Hi, Sue. Thanks for the question. Are there any photos of the rooms, this is in Hever obviously, that visitors are not allowed in? I mean, maybe you could talk about some of the places people don't get into, and maybe one of your or two of your favourite rooms.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, to create a visitor route, it's not possible to have routes through double rooms, as it were, if that makes sense. So there can't be dead ends. So yes, we do have to sort of truncate the visitor experience somewhat. You can do a hidden Hever tour where you can explore these hidden rooms. And there are four main rooms that we aren't able to currently show the public, although there are other spaces. Um, there's a very pink bathroom, which is really located as an antechamber to the best bedchamber. That's now called the Queen's Chamber. And it's a 1970s Godfrey Bonsack bathroom, which always shocks people when they see it. As I say, it would have been an antechamber, and it's quite likely actually that Anne Boleyn read some of Henry VIII's love letters in that space. It
But
was
not in the pink bathroom.
not in the pink bathroom with the previous decor. So that's one of my favourite rooms to sneak off to every now and again. There is also a corridor which wouldn't have existed during the Boleyn's time above the Great Chamber. So to add extra rooms, probably in the 19th century, the Great Chamber, a floor was put above it. And in the Boleyn's time, it just would have been an open crown post roof. That corridor isn't open. It leads to a bedroom now called Philip's bedroom. That was one of Astor's children, and a bedroom was created in the wake of the 1968 flood for him. But up there are all the original beams for the crown post roof that the Boleyns would have looked upon. And I love it up there because you are quite literally looking at the beams that they knew intimately. You know, they were the things that they saw when they woke up in the morning. There's something really intimate about being able to look at things that historical people saw. So yeah, I again quite often sneak up there and give some of those a rub.
And are there any photos, going back to Sue's question, are there any photos of those places that exist that people
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So if you look on our social media, if you go on our Twitter or our Facebook, that's Hever Castle, or on Instagram, you'll quite often see little sneak peeks of spaces to entice you to come on a
hidden Hever. As you say, you can do the tour, folks. So
and also for those who can't come to Hever, we do have an online platform called Inside Hever Castle, and we explicitly go into those places. We do little videos to show you all the bits that our visitors can't see. So yes, highly recommend that as well.
And that's all, I imagine that's all on the website if people want more information or want to book tickets. Head over to the Hever Castle website. Indeed. Okay, we're moving on again. Snuff Puppy one. What a lovely little name. I'm not sure what your real name is. I'm sure it's not Snuff Puppy, but thank you so much for the question. King Henry's door lock. Do you think he gave it for symbolic meaning? So did he give it, or did he just happen to forget it and leave it?
I think there are a number of these. In fact, we know that there is one in the Victorian Albert Museum called the Beddington lock. And it's very similar to the one at Hever. And both are believed to have been created by the king's locksmith, Henry Romain. Henry Romain was probably better known as an ironsmith. He created all sorts of things for the king, not least these locks, which would accompany the king on progress and will be fitted to the king's bedchamber. So these are highly movable objects, and I should think a number of them were in existence, and they would be fitted ahead of the king's arrival. Henry Romain, of course, also created things like andirons. We used to have two beautiful andirons. Don't get me started.
I saw them
that are
recently.
now-
I saw them recently.
They are at Knoll, and they have Henry and Anne's initials and Anne's white falcon on them. Who sold them? I will. They will rue the day when I find out. But we do have replicas of them at Hever in our Asterwing. But yes, Henry Romain was incredibly gifted artisan, and yeah, it's lovely to have one of Henry's locks and also a replica that Astor had made to fit onto the accompanying door in the Great Hall. So yes, Astor purchased the Henry Romain lock. So
okay.
Yeah.
So they were an actual purchase, right?
Yes.
They're lovely. It's a lovely lock, though, I have to say, hidden behind that little door. So if you haven't seen it, folks, next time you go to Hever, make sure you look behind the door in the Great Hall and you'll see a fabulous lock. Lovely. Right, now, moving on. Laurie Durr? I hope I've said that right, Laurie. What are Owen's thoughts around the additional evidence that recently surfaced which supports that one portrait at Hever may really be Mary Boleyn?
Yeah, I find it really compelling. So I think the project was called the Van Dyck Panel Project.
Yeah, something like that.
And this was I think an offshoot of a bigger project, and they were looking at the beauties that used to hang, I believe, in Queen Anne's bathroom at Windsor, and one of them had been separated from them because it was out of period, and that was the panel portrait of Mary Boleyn that is in the Royal Collection. And they were able to do dendrochronology on that panel with another and matched it to another portrait of a Kerry. And so yes, all of the pieces started to match together. So I don't think, however, we do have a contemporary portrait of Mary, but it's probably the closest that we will get to her. And our version is 18th century, so it's a later copy of that panel model. I think I might be wrong, but I think there's about 8 different versions of that particular model. But yes, I find the research compelling. We've got much, much closer now to Mary Boleyn. Previously, it was dismissed on not very good grounds. For example, the fact that she's wearing ermine was used by some historians to suggest that it couldn't be her. Well, if you look at the sumptuary laws from the time, she was married to an esquire of the body who were allowed to wear ermine. So all of the pieces actually fit before this research came out, but it was very welcome indeed to see it. And yeah, I find it really convincing.
Well, that's really good to hear. It's a charming little portrait. I've looked at it over many, many years and thought, oh, I really hope this is Mary. But, it was fantastic. And I love that. I chatted to the guy, Stephen, I think his name was, part of we did a brief podcast on that. So if you want to know more, guys, you haven't checked out my podcast, the Tudor History and Travel Show, that is a podcast about, is this the real face of Mary Boleyn, where I get to talk about with the guy. I love the fact it was kind of incidental. They weren't actually looking. They just rifling through a stack of oh, this is interesting. I thought that was just so funny, but brilliant.
It's often, how amazing discoveries are made. It always fascinates me that people often start to find something and then this falls into their lap, and
Yeah.
it's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Okay, now, gosh, we've got quite a few more. I'm just going to go actually to Olga's question for a moment. Can you advise me some books on Anne Boleyn and the Tudor family as well? It can be either fiction or non-fiction.
Gosh, where to start?
I
My
know,
goodness.
there's a list, isn't there?
Yeah. So the most obvious one for Anne Boleyn would be the sort of canonical Eric Ives biography of Mary. I don't agree with everything in it, but it's quite the most remarkable biography I've ever read. Claire Ridgway has written a number of books about the Boleyns. I would highly recommend hers. If you're looking for books about the Boleyns and their properties, then I would recommend In the Footsteps of Anne Boleyn by, I can't remember the author's name of that. Yes, I would definitely recommend that wonderful book as well. There's so many. If you're looking for a really good revision of the Boleyn men, Among the Walls of Court by Dr. Lauren Mackay is the most thrilling revision of Thomas and George Boleyn, and that really was the text behind the recent BBC series on the Boleyns. So I highly recommend that as well.
And I tell you which other book I really enjoy, that's Elizabeth Norton in Anne Boleyn's own words, because you've just got all of her stuff together in one place. So that's just very, I mean, you can find it all, but having it all brought together and having a commentary written about it, I think it's great.
It's really, really useful resource, actually. And another book that I think is brilliant is Amy Licence's biography of Anne. So yeah, I mean, there is a wealth of Boleyn biographies and also popular culture novels. My God, there are so many.
There are so many.
Yeah, and I don't think you can go wrong with some of the golden oldies like Jean Plaidy. Oh my God, love Jean Plaidy.
Brilliant. Well, actually, so while we're talking sort of books, Jamie Diane, hi Jamie, says, I was so struck by Mary Boleyn's portrayal in the documentary. What's the best biography to learn more about her? So it's a bit more of a challenging subject, but what would you say to that, Owen?
Now, Mary Boleyn, she is a gift to a novelist and a nightmare for a historian, because we only ever see her through other people's eyes. There is one letter in Mary's own words. So there are two biographies that you can choose from. There is one by Josephine Wilkinson, and there is also one by Alison Weir. Yeah, I'm not sure I would like to tackle her as a subject, because, as I say, there is such a scarce amount to actually colour her life.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
But she's a fascinating character, and my goodness, is she a Boleyn? That letter, oh my God, she's a Boleyn. There is no mistaking her from George and Anne. My God, she is a Boleyn.
We've had this conversation before, but I'm just so frustrated. We don't know more about Mary, and we don't know more about Elizabeth, Anne's mother. I'm dying to know about Elizabeth Howard. Oh, that drives me nuts.
One person who I would, in fact, I would love to dedicate a huge amount of my career to trying to find out more about Elizabeth Boleyn, because there must have been something about her. She gave birth to 3 extraordinary individuals.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Thomas was an amazing man, but it can't have just been Thomas that engendered these incredible beings. Another Boleyn woman who I have a huge amount of admiration for is Lady Margaret Butler. One thing that I really would love is for someone to be able to really get to grips with how important Ireland was to the Boleyns. They were incredibly proud of their Irish butler ancestry. It was the most prestigious part of their identity for such a long period of time. And I'm really proud to own an Irish groat with Henry and Anne's initials on it.
Wow.
I always think to myself how proud the Boleyns themselves must have been to see their daughter's initials as queen on an Irish coin. Yeah.
Fabulous. Lovely, lovely. I love it. Gail said, oh, I grew up on Jean Plaidy.
Same.
Absolutely. And somebody's just ordered your book. Janet's just ordered your book and really looking
thank you
forward
so
to
much. I do hope you enjoy it.
There you go. Now, if we're coming up, we've got 10 minutes to go. If there's a question I haven't asked, guys, and you really wanted answering, do pop it in. I try to keep track of the chat and the questions. Do pop that down. In the meantime, while we see if anybody does do just that, I'm going to ask you if there is one myth about the Boleyns that we need to just drop right now and never speak of it again, what would that be?
God, there are so many.
Have you got your top three? Maybe you've got your top three.
God. I think actually probably the most important one, not necessarily to eradicate, but for us to be able to talk about and challenge a bit, is this idea that the daughters were pimped out, essentially, were puppeteered into the king's bed, because the Boleyns were somehow hard on their luck. They weren't. These were incredibly wealthy people. They were part of the 1%, as Gareth Russell says. Thomas has an incredibly illustrious career. He has gained a huge amount by his own acumen. He has absolutely no need to attempt to do the unthinkable by placing his daughter on the throne of England. And by shattering that myth, we can finally ask what role the women in the family actually played. And my goodness, what a role they did play. And Anne's own role in her rise was incredibly exciting. I often think, she had all of these great minds to contend with: Wolsey, the Pope, and she provides the answer to Henry's great matter. This is a fascinating individual, and it's about time we recognise the agency of these women.
Yes,
and not just see them as puppets and then victims. What happened to them was horrific. What happened to Anne was horrific, but the story is far more complex than that. We need to allow her role to be explored, and not sort of explained away in this really unfounded narrative.
Absolutely. I couldn't say about the agency, the word, her agency. Anne Boleyn didn't sit passively on the sideline and get pushed around like a piece on a chessboard. No way did she do that. She was too smart. She was a force of nature. That would have never happened. So let's get out there, guys, and let's just spread the word. But there was so much more to it than that. Okay, lovely. I think we're sort of... I haven't noticed any other questions. Oh, hold on a minute. Phil, first of all, has said, Owen, I hope you and Claire do more books together. So that's very nice. And then Phil says, what is the best true movie to get about Anne? Well, that might have been a little bit... We might have answered that a little bit at the beginning. But anything else you want to say on that?
Yeah, I'd like to... a lot of my Boleyn fans won't appreciate... me for this, but do give Wolf Hall a go, because this is not my favorite interpretation of Anne, but I think it's an important interpretation of Anne, because it does give us an Anne that isn't necessarily likable, and not because she's a scheming bitch or anything like that. It's because you are seeing a public version of Anne and not a private version of Anne. And you are seeing her in relation to an inferior, We know that Anne wasn't particularly generous, shall we say, to her inferiors. We know on more than one occasion she admonishes people for overstepping the mark. She is very much an adherent to social hierarchy. So I think it's a really interesting portrayal of Anne. It's not my favourite, but it's an important part of the canon, because we do see her as her adversaries would have seen her. She was not liked. This is a woman who was not only not supported by half the country, much more than that, never supported her, but even members of her own family couldn't support her. So we do have to recognise that. And also Claire Foy shows us how even if you can't support someone, you can sympathise with them when they are horrifically and brutally slaughtered. And she does that amazingly. And another thing that I would love to eradicate is this idea that you can support Catherine of Aragon and hate Anne Boleyn, but also really revile what happened to Anne and not think that she deserved it, because I don't know anyone that deserved what happened to Anne Boleyn. And I think we'd be a better being if we got over this notion that people deserve such horrific
and that people are so polarized. I think
I've never really understood that.
Everybody always has you show me somebody who is, without I was saying, when I say Anne was no sinner, she was no saint, she was both, and most people are like that, aren't they? We're all complicated and messy, to use your, and that's part of what I like about Anne, actually. She's just complicated, and so I can relate to that.
She is, and I think we all need to go back and watch Six the Musical, because do you know what? I love Catherine of Aragon. I love her because I find her I think there are many, many qualities that she had that Anne had. I don't understand how you can not love one and not the other. And the same can be said for all of the wives. They are incredible individuals. I don't think any of them had it easy. And I think we should show a bit of love
That sounds good to me. Now, we do have questions keeping coming in, but we're nearly coming up to 8:00, and Owen's been hard at work all day, so I think we probably need to wind things up now. And actually,
quick answers, if that would help.
Okay, well, let's do a couple of really quick answers then. Where do you stand on the order of birth of the siblings?
Oh, I think definitely Mary first. I think the legal papers of her heirs sort of hints the fact that she's the eldest. I would then say Anne and then George.
Okay.
Okay.
Quick. And Petal Rose says, is it true that Thomas didn't care about the fact that I think she's saying about the fact that his daughter was executed. So this idea that he just didn't care about it.
No, I think he must have been utterly broken. I think if you read his correspondence post May 1536, you will find a broken man.
Yeah.
He's chiefly having to correspond with Thomas Cromwell, who is certainly the architect of Anne's downfall. And Thomas is a different person. Look at the correspondence before that event, look at it after. This is a broken man, and he not only lost the daughter he adored and who was his joy, and he also lost his heir, George, who he loved just as much. So, no, I think
it's another myth. We can bat that one away. Absolutely. Okay, that's lovely. So I think we're going. All I want to ask you, Owen, is, do you have any projects coming up? Because I know you do. So can you tell us whatever it is you can tell us about?
So I'm working at the moment. I can't say a huge amount about it, but I'm working alongside Hever's amazing curator, Alison Palmer, and my co-assistant curator, Kate McCaffrey. We are going to be launching an exhibition soon at Hever, so I hope you can all come and visit us in the new year. What else am I working on? A new book with Claire Ridgway. So whoever suggested that we write another book, we're certainly doing
Your
that.
wish is coming true.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's loads of lovely new things coming up at Hever. They won't all happen immediately. Obviously, the pandemic has slowed things up. But yeah, there are going to be changes at Hever, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy them as much as we are. So yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much. Look, there's been lots of people writing comments, and Owen, you can always check out and have a read of what people have been saying. You might want to reply to folk if we didn't get to their questions. But maybe folks out there, you could just show your love by giving Owen a good or a heart. And if you've enjoyed this chat and you know somebody who might also have enjoyed it, you might want to share it. Share the link with somebody else, one of your Tudor loving friends. Okay, so Owen, thank you so much for coming and taking this hour out of your day after a very, very busy day at Hever.
It's an absolute privilege and pleasure, and thank you all so much for your wonderful questions. It's been a real joy.
That's lovely. So I'm just now going to if you could stay with me a couple of minutes, I just wanted to say to you folks out there, thank you so much for joining us at the beginning of a new season. And I will be back with another episode of Tudor Talk live chat here on my YouTube channel next month. I think it is the first Saturday in the month, but do look out for my emails. I always email and let people know what's coming up. If you're not subscribed to my mailing list, you can do so by going to the homepage of my blog, which of course is thetudortravelguide.com, and you'll be able to see, well, you can download your free guide. I've got a free guide there. You will get a lovely free guide about your Tudor weekend away in Kent if you sign up to my mailing list, and doing so you will definitely get notified of everything that's coming up, including next month's talk. And who do we have coming? Well, earlier this year, you may remember if you've been joining us regularly that we had Michael Carter from English Heritage join us. Now, Michael is an absolute world expert on monasticism, and he was talking to us about the dissolution of the monasteries. Now, Michael, if you remember, is so passionate and so enthusiastic that several of you wrote to me and said, "Oh, can we have him back, please?" Well, I have delivered, folks. Michael's coming back in October, and he's going to be talking to us about Hales Abbey and the whole idea of pilgrimage. Now, that's probably a bit more medieval than Tudor, but of course you may well remember that Hales Abbey was one of the first abbeys visited during the visitations when Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII were at Hever Castle, and there was a whole saga of the duck's blood. And if you don't know about the duck's blood, then make sure you tune in to next month, because you'll find out about it then. So it'll be Michael that'll be joining us then. And just a reminder, again, if you want to follow my everyday shenanigans, you just need to point your scanner on your mobile phone at my QR code, and that should whiz you through by some kind of miracle that I still don't understand to my Instagram page, and it would be lovely to see you there. Okay, I think we're done. So thank you. Have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world. It's been a pleasure to see you here. Bye for now.